So, I have a question for everyone in the audience. How familiar are you with carbon footprint? Are you emoji 1? Who's in emoji 1? Perfect. There should be emoji 1s in this room. If not, then I have failed. Emoji 2s? Okay. Emoji 3s? All right, we've got some experts in the room. Well, let me tell you why I think carbon literacy is so important and why we want to move more people towards emoji 2 and emoji 3. So today when we talk about a single-use coffee cup or a flight, we tend to say those things are bad. You know, coffee cups are bad, flights are bad. And what that tells me is that we fundamentally lack the ability to understand and communicate the impact of our choices in an objective manner. So what if instead we lived in a world where we could say, oh yeah, single-use coffee cup, yeah, it's like around 20 grams of CO2 emissions, give or take. An hour of flying, around 120 kilograms of CO2 emissions, right? Now we're no longer saying things are good or bad, right or wrong. We're using data and we're being objective. So let me start with a just sort of high level of what is carbon footprint from my words, okay? So, you woke up in this morning, maybe you turned on your podcast, you turned on some lights, you used your electric toothbrush, you took the subway here. All of those things require energy. And today, most of our energy comes from fossil fuels, right? Fossil fuels exist naturally on the planet. There's many different types of fossil fuels. But when we burn fossil fuels for energy, we release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, just like that, exactly like that, those little turning things. And in the atmosphere, these greenhouse gases accumulate and they trap heat. And my newest analogy is a crochet blanket. Okay, think of a crochet blanket. You've got like little thin, wispy crochet blankets. You can poke your finger through it. That's what we used to be like. Now we're like this really thick, chunky yarn crochet blanket where you can barely get your finger through. And the same analogy applies for trapping heat on our planet. So we've just put so much greenhouse gases because of all the energy that we have used. And so carbon dioxide is one of the most common greenhouse gases. It makes up about 70% of our global emissions, but there are others as well. There's methane and nitrous oxide. Anyone know what is a source of methane? Cows, yeah, absolutely. What about nitrous oxide? Anyone know that? Cars, yeah, cars. Fertilizers, right? That's why eating organic can be very impactful. So what is carbon footprint? The way that I like to explain carbon footprint is it's the measure of the amount of carbon dioxide released in an activity. So let's take your phone, right? Everyone has a phone, you can relate to that. You charge your phone for 10 minutes, you're using energy. There's a carbon footprint for that because there's likely fossil fuels that were burned for you to charge your phone. Now let's say you charge your phone for 15 minutes instead of 10 minutes, then you have a different carbon footprint. You've used more energy for 15 minutes, okay? Now let's say you charge your phone in New York versus Austin for 10 minutes. There's a different carbon footprint because the grids have different components of energy. Some might have, one grid might have more renewable energy, one grid might have more fossil fuels in their energy. So, everything that we do that requires energy and causes greenhouse gases to be released is what we measure as a carbon footprint. So in my daily carbon footprint, it could be from my diet, from the energy I use, from the transportation. My annual carbon footprint, which is usually how it's measured, is everything that I do in a year that uses fossil fuels and releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Cities have carbon footprints, right? Made up of everything in the city that uses energy, and companies have carbon footprints as well. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of an idea of what carbon footprint is. So now it's time for a game. I'm sure you were all expecting that, but it's serious stuff, so I want to make sure everyone is ready. Is everyone ready? Yes. All right, okay. You have 10 seconds to remember as much as you can on this slide. I'm watching, no screenshots. All right, I was standing in someone's way. All right, serious game. First question. What is the average carbon footprint of an apple? And if you remember the potato, you might get this right. How many people say A? B? C? D? Okay, everyone's like shy now. So the answer is B. Who remembers what a potato is? 40 grams, okay? And in the study, an apple's around 35 grams. This is a study that was done in the UK. A tomato is around 130 grams in the UK because most tomatoes are grown in greenhouses, requires more energy. And a bowl of rice, which is 3 tablespoons of rice, 350 grams, right? Because rice production produces methane, and methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And we're actually going to get to learn a little bit about methane today. What about a serving of chicken? If you remember a serving of pork, you'll get this right. How many people say A? B? C? D? Okay, there's a lot of groupthink going on here, okay? Pork, what was pork? 1,800 grams, according to this study, okay? And chicken is around 1,300 grams. A serving of a vegetarian meal, around 600 grams of CO2 emissions, and a serving of beef is around 7,700. Okay. What about a dairy latte? How many people saw the coffee menu when you were getting coffee? Did anyone see the coffee menu? Yeah, okay. What's a dairy latte? How many people say A? B? C? D? Okay, we're a little bit less groupthink on this one. And the answer is 350 grams for a dairy latte. Coffee on its own, does anyone remember? Around that, yeah, 50 grams of CO2 emissions for coffee on its own. So the majority of the footprint actually comes from the dairy as opposed to the coffee itself. And a plant-based latte is around 140 grams of CO2 emissions, okay? What about an email? This one is a little bit out of left field. You have nothing to really compare it with. How many people say A? B? C? And D? Okay. A little bit around the spectrum here. And the answer is D, 4 grams, thankfully. So you can actually look at your inbox and measure the lower sort of like threshold of what your inbox is. But the more attachments and images we have, the higher the carbon footprint is. And the reason is because of the data center usage. Data centers leverage a lot of energy. And if we have good email hygiene, we need less data centers and we have lower carbon footprints. And at Clever Carbon, we have a policy where we actually send links. We don't send attachments in our emails. So we send links to a folder, so therefore we're not creating redundancy. And especially for a company has like 10,000 people, right? Like, why do you need one PDF, 10,000 copies of it, right? Okay, so last part of the game here. The average annual carbon footprint of an individual in Australia is around 15.4 tons, okay? 15.4 tons. What do you think the average is in the UK? How many people say A? B? C? And D? Interesting, okay, so people think that the UK is a lot higher than Australia, and you might be surprised, but it's actually a lot lower. Okay, it's around 8.3 tons per person. I'll get back to this in a moment. What about Vietnam? Any guesses? How many people say A? B? C? D? Okay, so we're a little bit all around here as well, and the answer is actually 2.1 tons, okay, an individual in Vietnam. And fun fact, one flight from New York to Tokyo, 1.8 tons. Okay. And the US. How many people say A? B? C? And D? Okay. So if you said D, you are correct. The average is around 17.5. So Canada, Australia, the US, all around 15 to 17. European countries, you know, Germany, Italy, all of those around 5 to 10. And the global average is currently 6.3 tons. And by 2030, the UN says that we need to be around 2.1 tons. And there's a number of different reasons why there's such a big difference. Anything from policies and incentives, which can impact the renewable access, renewable energy access. It could be due to infrastructure around transportation, even things like dietary preferences. But you know, because you're all in the room, it means that you know probably what your carbon footprint is because it was part of the registration process. So one of the ways that I wanted to actually incorporate learning into the conference as well. So here's a little snapshot of what we do at Clever Carbon. I do corporate workshops as well, and I want to leave you with a famous quote from someone clever: "What gets measured gets changed." Thank you very much.